Montana Territory, late autumn of 1877. The wind howled like it had a grudge, and snow bit along the ridges of the Bitterroots as Zadie Pearlman stumbled off the stage route, veil-torn, boots-soaked, heart raw and rattling in her chest like a loose wagon wheel. Her wedding dress, once ivory and perfect, clung heavy and wet to her legs. She had been headed to marry a man she had never met in person, an arrangement made by letters and family pressure, but when the stagecoach wheel cracked 3 miles outside of Bitter Creek and the driver walked off with the team to find help, she had been left behind. Alone. The chill was already deep in her bones when she saw a small log cabin tucked at the edge of the trees, smoke trailing thin from a crooked chimney. No path led to it, no signs of life, but it was something. And right now, something was everything. Zadie pushed forward, skirts dragging through snow. Her fingers ached as she knocked on the door, then pushed it open when no answer came. Inside, it was dim and still. Empty. At least at first. She stood there, shivering and dripping, when a voice behind her said, "You lost, miss." She spun around, heart in her throat. A tall man stepped from the lean-to at the side of the cabin, holding a bucket of water. He looked maybe 35, his dark blonde hair wind-tossed, eyes the color of a storm coming in. His coat was worn but clean, his boots caked in snow. He blinked at her, like he could not quite believe what he was seeing. Zadie swallowed. "I was on the stage. It broke down. The driver went for help. I did not know where else to go." He set the bucket down slow. "You walked here in that dress?" "I did not plan on walking anywhere today." Something in his face softened. "Come on inside," he said, stepping past her and opening the stove. "You're half frozen." Zadie followed, arms wrapped tight around herself. The cabin was one room, warm now that he was setting the fire again. There was a cot in the corner, rough shelves with dried goods, a rifle mounted by the door. He pulled a blanket from a trunk and handed it to her. "Sit. I'll make coffee." She sat. The blanket scratched, but it was warm. The man moved quiet but sure, like he had done every one of these tasks 1,000 times. He poured water into a blackened pot and set it on the stove. She looked down at her dress, then at the muddy floor. "I am sorry about the mess." He glanced over. "Seems to me you got bigger things to worry about than a floor." Zadie looked at him for the first time without panic clouding her eyes. He was not handsome in the way city men were. His face was rough, lines settled deep at the corners of his eyes, but there was something steady there. "Kind. I did not catch your name," he said. "Zadie Pearlman. From St. Louis." He nodded once. "Jackson Whitlow?" They sat in silence for a moment while the fire crackled and snow tapped soft at the windows. "Where were you headed, Miss Pearlman?" She hesitated. "To Bitter Creek. To marry a man named Charles Haverland. My parents arranged it. We had written letters. He paid for my travel." Jackson looked down at his hands. "You love him." "I do not know him." He made a sound low in his throat. "That is a hard way to start a life." Zadie looked away. "It is not like I had many choices." He poured the coffee and handed her a tin cup. His fingers brushed hers, warm and calloused. She held onto the cup like it was her last tie to the world. "You can stay here tonight. I will ride into Bitter Creek come morning, send word. Find out what happened to your driver. Or your groom." Zadie nodded, though something in her stomach twisted at the thought. The hours passed slow. Jackson made her soup from dried beans and salt pork. They ate by the fire, the wind outside still howling, but the cabin stayed warm. "I built this place when I came back from the war," he said. "Took me 2 years. Was not much when I started." "You live here alone?" He nodded. "My parents died when I was back east. I came out here for quiet. Never figured on company." Zadie smiled faintly. "I never figured on walking through snow in a wedding gown." He chuckled, and it was the first sound of lightness she had heard in days. That night, he gave her the cot and slept near the fire. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind ease, to the slow rhythm of his breath. There was something grounding about it, like the world had stopped spinning quite so fast. The next morning, as dawn broke pale over the trees, Jackson hitched his mare and saddled up. "I will be back by noon," he said. There is coffee in the pot. Firewood stacked behind the stove. Zadie stood on the porch, blanket still wrapped around her, and watched him ride off into the trees. He returned just before midday, jaw tight, eyes darker than before. He dismounted, handed her a letter. What is this? From the sheriff. Charles Haverland left town 3 days ago. Said he changed his mind. Zadie stared at the letter. Her throat closed. He left. I am sorry. She stepped back inside and sat down hard on the cot. The tears came then, hot and fast. She had crossed half the country for a man who had not even bothered to wait for her. Jackson knelt in front of her, hands resting on his knees. He did not try to stop her crying. He just sat there, quiet and steady. When the storm inside her calmed, she looked up. What do I do now? You are free now, he said. That may not feel like much, not yet. But it is something. She searched his face. Why are you being kind to me? He shrugged. Because you needed someone. And I had room. Zadie's breath hitched. Room. In this place. In my life. In here. He touched his chest. She could not speak. Stay a while, he said. You do not need to decide anything yet. Just stay. Zadie looked around the cabin. It was rough, small, quiet. But for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. All right, she whispered. Jackson stood and went back to tending the fire. But his eyes lingered on her a little longer before turning away. And Zadie, sitting there in a borrowed blanket with her heart cracked wide open, realized she had stopped feeling cold. By the third morning, the snow had crusted over with ice, and the world beyond Jackson's cabin looked like it had been smothered in glass. Zadie stood outside with an armful of kindling, her breath curling into the crisp air, her fingers stinging through borrowed gloves a size too large. The cabin door creaked behind her. You'll want to keep the smaller pieces for the stove, Jackson said, stepping down from the porch, sleeves rolled past his elbows despite the cold. The larger ones choked the draft. She shifted the bundle in her arms. I figured if I was staying, I ought to do more than sit by the fire and drink your coffee. You've been carrying your weight, he said, then paused. But I won't stop you if you're set on chopping wood. I'm not delicate. She bent to stack the kindling in the lean-to. Just underprepared. He watched her for a beat. You ever used an axe? No. But I watched my uncle split logs once. That's a start. Later that morning, he handed her the axe and guided her through her first swing. The blade sank shallow, the log rocking on its end. She frowned. Don't muscle it, he said, stepping behind her. Let the weight do the work. His hands settled lightly at her elbows, adjusting her grip. His touch was careful, the way someone might show you how to hold a newborn. She tried again. The axe bit deeper. Jackson nodded. Better. They worked like that for a while, in silence broken only by the thud of steel and the occasional crow overhead. When her shoulders began to ache, she paused, leaning on the axe handle. Do you ever go into town? She asked. Once a month, maybe. He picked up a split piece and tossed it into the stack. I trade for soap, kerosene, tobacco, sometimes flour. No church, no dances. He glanced at her. Not much call for that in my life anymore. Zadie scraped her sleeve across her brow. You ever think of leaving? I did. Once. After the war, I tried Denver. Too many people. Too loud. Couldn't sleep for all the noise. What made you come back here? He didn't answer at first. Just picked up the next log and set it straight. Felt like I could breathe here. That was enough. The wind shifted, lifting her hair from her shoulders. She studied him, his steady hands, the way he moved like he'd learned patience the hard way. Inside, the cabin smelled of ash and bread. She had taken to baking in the mornings, working with what little he had. That day it was cornmeal biscuits, rough but warm. He ate them without complaint. You ever think about going back to St. Louis? He asked, not looking at her. There's nothing left for me there. He nodded once, slow. That night, she sat at the small table stitching the hem of a wool skirt he had found in an old trunk. He was oiling his saddle by lantern light. The silence between them was companionable, not empty. You were a soldier, she said, threading the needle again. How long? For years. Infantry. Saw the Mississippi more than I ever wanted. Did you lose people? He set the saddle down. Every man did. She folded the cloth over her knee. You never talk about it. There's not much to say that'd make sense to someone who wasn't in it. She nodded, respecting the wall he kept there. Were you close with your family? He asked. She didn't answer right away. My father and I argued more than we agreed. But he meant well. My mother, she didn't want me to go, but she didn't stop me. I think she thought it'd be safer being married. He didn't offer a platitude. Just waited. I wanted to build something of my own, she said quietly. Not just pass from one house to another, one man to another. You still can. She looked at him across the lamplit room. It's too late for dreams. No, he said. It's just later than you planned. For the first time in days, she felt something shift inside her, less like grief, more like space being cleared. She finished the hem and folded the skirt neatly. I'll wear this tomorrow. You planning something? Just breakfast. And maybe a walk. I want to see what's beyond the ridge. He smiled, an honest, soft-creased thing that changed his whole face. I'll take you. She didn't look away. I'd like that. He nodded once, then stood to bank the fire. When he passed her, she brushed his sleeve with her fingers. Just a touch. Just enough. Neither of them said anything about it. But the air between them felt warmer than the hearth. A quiet promise, not yet spoken. The ridge rose gradual behind the cabin, its slope stitched with blackened pine and frost-stiff sage. By mid-morning, the wind had settled and the snow underfoot gave with a soft hush. Jackson led the way, his rifle slung across his back. Zadie just behind in the wool skirt that hung a little loose but held her warmth. They didn't talk much at first. He broke a path with his boots, steady and sure, and she followed in his tracks, breath white in the air. The sky stretched brittle blue above them, the kind of color that only came after snow. When they reached the crest, the land opened wide. Below lay a narrow valley, a ribbon of creek running half-frozen through it, and beyond, the mountains gathered like old sentinels. Zadie stopped and took it in, hand to her brow. I didn't know it would be like this. Most folks don't come far enough to see it, Jackson said. How long's it been since someone did? He squinted toward the horizon. A trapper passed through last spring. Left a snare line and 2 pelts. Before that, maybe a year. She turned toward him. Don't you ever get lonely? He didn't answer right away. Then I used to. Then I got used to the quiet. After a while, it stops feeling like something's missing. And now, he met her eyes. Now it feels like something started again. Zadie looked down at her boots, snow clinging to the laces. I don't know what I'm starting. I barely know what I'm standing on. You don't have to know. Not yet. A hawk circled overhead, wings catching the light. Below, the creek curved away into shadow. You ever build anything more than the cabin? She asked. Put up a barn frame 2 summers back. Came down in the wind before I could roof it. Still want to try again? Maybe, he said. If I had help. She didn't smile, but a line eased from between her brows. I can learn. They headed back down slow, the sun tilting west. At the cabin, he lifted the latch for her and paused. There's another room, he said. Wasn't finished when you came. Been using it for storage, mostly. She stepped inside, brushing snow from her sleeves. What kind of storage? Built it for family. Back when I thought maybe one day. Zadie turned to look at him. I can clear it, make it livable. If you want space of your own. She set her gloves on the table. I think I'd like that. He nodded once and went to fetch tools from the lean-to. By dusk, he had cleared the crates and swept the plank floor. The room wasn't large, but the window faced west and the walls held the warmth of the main hearth. Zadie unpacked the few things she'd carried in her satchel, a comb, a worn Bible, a scrap of lace from home, and set them on the shelf he'd built from cedar. Later, she found him outside, checking the fence line where a post had started to lean. She watched as he wedged a stone beneath it, then tamped the dirt with his boot. You fix things like you expect them to break again, she said. I fix them so I'll be ready when they do. Zadie stepped closer, scarf tugged tight beneath her chin. I don't know how to be useful here. I can sew and cook, but that's not the same as building fences or hunting elk. He leaned against the post. You've been here 5 days. You've taken care of my home like it was yours. That counts. I don't want to count. I want to belong. Jackson straightened, eyes searching hers. Then stay. The wind stirred the pine needles overhead. She reached out, fingers brushing his wrist. I'm not afraid of hard work, she said. I know. I don't need promises. Just truth. He lowered his voice, steady as the earth beneath them. Everything I've said to you's been truth. They stood there, dusk deepening around them, and the silence between them held something new, not uncertainty, but wait. A choice settling in. That night, they sat at the table with their bowls of stew, and when she reached for the bread, their hands touched. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. Tomorrow, there would be more wood to cut, more fence to mend. But tonight, they shared the small warmth of the cabin, the quiet knowledge that something had taken root between them, not sudden, not fanciful, but real. Steady. Like the mountains outside. By the end of the week, the rhythm between them had settled like snow on pine boughs, quiet, weighty, natural. Zadie rose early before the frost lifted from the windows and warmed the stove while Jackson checked the traps he'd set along the tree line. They moved around each other without need for much talk, but the silence no longer felt like space, it felt like thread. That morning, when he returned with a hair slung over his shoulder, she was kneading flour into biscuits, sleeves rolled to her elbows. He stood in the doorway a moment, watching her hands work the dough with a surety she hadn't had when she first arrived. Looks like you've taken to the kitchen, he said. I never cooked with wood before. Feels more honest than an oven that clicks. He hung the hair on the hook outside and stepped in, stamping snow from his boots. Honest's a good word for it. She brushed flour from her hands. Do you ever miss the life you had before here? He pulled off his coat, thoughtful. Sometimes I miss the ease. Riding into town and knowing someone have a hot plate waiting. But ease and peace aren't the same thing. Zadie returned to her dough. No, they're not. He came to stand beside her, watching as she folded the dough and pressed the cutter through it. You planning to stay past spring? I was thinking about it, she said, not looking up. But I don't know what spring will bring. You'll have a place here if you decide to. She met his eyes then. You sure of that? Yes. She didn't answer, but she reached for the pan and began placing the biscuits in even rows, her movements steady. After breakfast, Jackson gathered his tools and motioned toward the barn frame he'd mentioned once, half buried under snow and time. I figured it's due another try. Zadie pulled on her shawl and followed him outside. The posts were weathered but held with the stubbornness of things built by hand. Jackson ran his hand along the main beam, then looked over his shoulder. If we brace it here, he said, pointing to the southern corner, we can keep the snow from sagging the roofline. I should have done it that way the first time. You didn't have help then, she said. He passed her a hammer. I do now. They worked until the sun dipped low, breath-forming clouds between them, wood groaning under the shift of new weight. Zadie held beams steady while Jackson drove nails, her arms trembling by the end of it. Inside, she soaked her hands in warm water while he built up the fire. The ache in her shoulders settled into something that felt good earned. You ever think about having a family? She asked, voice soft in the dim. He didn't answer right away. I used to think it wasn't meant for me, not after the things I saw. But lately, I've been thinking different. She dried her hands and turned to face him. What changed? You walked through my door. The fire cracked, drawing shadows across the wall. I don't need a husband, she said, but I want a partner. Someone who sees me. I see you, Zadie. She stepped closer. I see you too. The space between them narrowed, breath mingling, and when she rested her hand against his chest, he covered it with his own, rough and warm. Neither of them moved fast. There was no rush, no hunger sharpened by fear. Just a long look and the quiet understanding that whatever had begun in the snow was real, and it was growing. She spoke again, voice low. I'm not ready to say forever. You don't need to, he said. Just stay tonight. Stay tomorrow. We'll build the rest as we go. Zadie nodded, and he kissed her once, slow and sure, like someone laying the first stone of a home they meant to finish. The thaw came slow. By late March, the creek behind the cabin had begun to run clear again, and the snow receded into shadows like it was ashamed of overstaying. Zadie stood at the edge of the porch, hands wrapped around a mug of broth, watching sap drip from the pines. The air carried the scent of wet bark and something clean beneath it, like the ground was remembering how to breathe. Jackson was mending the gate, sleeves rolled to his elbows, jaw set against the wind that still cut through the trees. She walked down to him, stepping carefully over the softening earth. "You think the mare's ready to carry again?" she asked. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked toward the lean-to. "She dropped her coat early." "That's a good sign. I'd say she's got enough strength to breed come May." "I've been reading that book of yours," she said, nodding toward the shelf inside where a dog-eared volume on animal husbandry sat wedged between a ledger and a jar of nails. "It's got a section about foaling." I marked the page. "You're planning ahead." "I'm thinking about what we'll need. Feed, shelter. Maybe a second pen if the calf comes early too." Jackson leaned against the post, watching her. "You've been thinking farther ahead than spring." "I have." The wind shifted, stirring her hair across her cheek. She didn't fix it. He didn't look away. "I'd like to make this official," he said. "Not just us working and eating and sleeping under the same roof. I want a life with you. Fully." Zadie didn't answer at once. Her eyes searched his face, steady and unflinching. "I don't want a wedding dress or a preacher I don't know," she said. "You won't have either. Unless you want them." "I don't. I want to stand beside you and know we chose each other. That's enough. It's more than enough." They walked the fence line together, checking for weakness where the earth had softened. She pointed out a place where the wood had started to rot near the west post. "We'll need cedar," he said. "I can ride to the mill come week's end. I'll keep the fire going. Maybe start a new plot near the ridge. The soil's dark there." He nodded. "Could run spinach and early potato. Maybe get barley in before the heat." She stopped walking. "Are you ready for what comes after the planting? The long days and the quiet nights and the weight of it all." "I've already had the quiet." As for the weight, he reached for her hand. "I want to carry it with you." That night, they sat outside on the porch steps, shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in the same blanket. The stars were sharp above them, and the wind had settled into a soft hum through the trees. "You ever think about what you'd name a child if it came to that?" she asked softly. "I used to think about names for brothers I never had. Always liked the sound of Eli." Zadie leaned into his side. "I've always kept Anna close to my heart. My grandmother's name." He rested his chin against her temple. "Then if we're ever so blessed, we'll have names ready." "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "I was. But not now." The weeks passed into April. They cleared the field near the ridge and set a fence around it. Jackson made a trip to the sawmill and returned with enough cedar to rebuild the pen and patch the barn roof. Zadie started seedlings in trays carved from hollowed bark, lining them along the sunniest window. One morning, she stood at the table sorting seeds when he came in with a pouch from town. He set it down without a word and pulled something small from his shirt pocket, a silver ring, worn smooth, the band plain but strong. "It was my mother's," he said. "I used to carry it in my saddlebag. Figured I'd never have cause to give it to anyone." Zadie took it from his hand, her fingers trembling. She slid it on without asking the size. It fit like it had always belonged there. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The following Sunday, under a sky pale with spring light, they stood beneath the cottonwood behind the cabin and spoke quiet vows, just the two of them. No witness but the land and the creek and the hawk that circled overhead. They built the days together after that. The garden sprouted. The mare carried well. Jackson found a second cow for trade, and Zadie lined the shelves with jars of dried beans and salt. He carved her a chair to match his, and she embroidered a strip of linen to hang above the hearth with their initials stitched in green thread. They never talked about the man who'd left her waiting in Bitter Creek, and she never again mentioned the city she'd left behind. Those things had faded like the last of the snow melted into the soil beneath their boots. One evening in late summer, Jackson came in from the barn, hands streaked with grain dust, and found her humming by the stove. He paused in the doorway, watching her sway in time with the ladle, the light setting her hair aglow. "You're smiling," he said. "I was thinking about the first time I knocked on this door," she said. "I didn't know it would be my home." He walked across the room, wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I did." And she leaned back into him, heart steady, hands at peace, knowing that what they'd found wasn't built from rescue or chance. It was made of mornings and would smoke and the slow, certain choosing of one another over and over again. Years passed and the land bore them food and shelter and joy. They never grew rich, but their table was always full. Children came first, a boy with Jackson's quiet eyes, then a girl with Zadie's laughter. They taught them how to plant and mend and speak truth with kindness. The house grew with them, each board set with care. And every evening when the stars rose sharp above the ridge, Jackson took Zadie's hand and they sat together, not needing words, the quiet between them full of everything they'd built. Their love didn't blaze. It endured like the mountains, like the seasons, like the sky that curved wide above their home. And it never left them, not once.